I'm Wendy Lures, and I had the great pleasure of living in the Czech Republic from 1983 to 1986 with my ambassador husband, Bill Lures, who's here with us tonight. And that was during deep communism. During those dark days, we filled the house with American writers, painters, playwrights, and invited the most interesting people in the country to come and meet them. Many of them are here tonight. But two are not, Vaclav and Olga Havel. We are here tonight to ensure his legacy in English and in North America through the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation in partnership with the Vaclav Havel Library in Prague. On your way in, you took keys. On November 17th, the students started jangling their keys. I forgot mine. Somebody's got some keys that you can hand me? There we go. Somebody started jangling their keys. Why? In Czechoslovakia, they rang them to mark the end of their school year. So they were marking the end of communism. And that sound became the symbol of freedom. Use them as your applause tonight. It takes a village to organize this massive undertaking. First, I'd like to thank our board members, Milt Cerny of McGuire Woods and Elliot Burke of Burke Farah, and Fred Malik, who's not here tonight but has been very much present in all of this, the chairman of the American Friends of the Czech Republic, which is our partner in this evening tonight, who were crucial in getting Speaker Boehner to place Havel's bust in the US Capitol tomorrow, which is pretty extraordinary, as we all know. The president of AFOCR, Tom Dine, is here tonight representing him, but this massive undertaking would never have happened without the leadership of Ambassador Peter Gondalovich and the entire, and I mean the entire, Czech embassy staff. And now for the New York crew. Patty Stack of the American Friends of the Czech Republic. And her truly supportive husband, Jack Stack. And I should say mine as well. Bill Lures, thank you so much for putting up with all this. Lisa Stone, who's over there, who was an American advisor of the Václav Havel Presidential Office. Joseph Balash, president of BBLA and Bohemian Hall. Who has provided huge support, for all of the 2.5 years that we've existed, our office, and Misha Boruta, who works with him, whom he's lent to us. But as we all know, the sleepless person in the room is our extraordinary executive director, Pavla Niklova. Bravo, Pavla. She's probably out there somewhere. She will be steward for the Václav Havel Library Foundation's ongoing work, thanks to all of you. You've heard a lot of wonderful speeches last night, and you will hear some more today and tomorrow night, but you will also hear Havel's own voices and own words. But more importantly right now is the most important person in the room. Please join me in welcoming our incomparable Madam Secretary, Madeleine Albright.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Dobrý večer, good evening to everybody, and welcome. This is really an amazing event. Before I begin, I really want to make so sure that you all understand the amazing work that Wendy has put in to not only this event, but her dedication first to Czechoslovakia and then the Czech Republic and the Slovak people, and her great sense of belonging to a country where she made a difference. You have been one of the strongest friends and advocates for the Czech people here in the United States. Wendy, you already mentioned Bill, but I have to say that we have to pay, there are many ambassadors here tonight, but I do think a special tribute goes to Bill Lors, who has lived with Wendy a long time, and who has been a very special friend also, and where we did all meet the most interesting people. He has been a great inspiration. It's a pleasure that we're all here tonight with so many lovers of freedom from the heart of Europe, right here in Washington. Tonight, we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, that glorious, peaceful movement that showed communism the door and ushered in a new beginning for freedom, democracy, and a market economy in the Czech and Slovak lands. Tonight, we also remember the quiet hero whose strength, moral clarity, and vision helped guide the revolution to success. Vaclav Havel was a very dear friend to me and to many in this room, and he was an inspiration to all who cherish liberty in the Czech Republic and around the world. So I'm especially pleased that we are joined here tonight by the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation and the American Friends of the Czech Republic, two American nonprofits founded after the changes in each dedicated to advancing the interests of the Czech Republic and extending the legacy of its best-known son. Both groups have been deeply involved in preparing the celebrations around town this week, and we're very grateful for all that they have done. In preparing for this week's events, I have spent many of the last days rereading some of Václav Havel's works. There are many messages which continue to carry a special meaning and resonance today. But perhaps the one that echoes most strongly right now is his belief that the key to salvation in this world rests on individual responsibility. Every time I read Václav Havel, I learn something new, and that is especially the case whenever I have the opportunity to hear his words read aloud. So we are in for a very special treat tonight, and I hope that hearing his words will resonate with all of you also. I would now like to introduce some special guests, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies of the Parliament of the Czech Republic, Mr. Jan Hamáček. I have asked him to say a few words to begin our evening.
Madam Havlova, Madam Secretary, Senator Murphy, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me that I can speak on this occasion. I thank the organizers, the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation and the American Friends of the Czech Republic, and I thank all of you who came to support a good cause. Tomorrow, we will have an opportunity to participate in the solemn dedication of the bust of President Václav Havel in the United States Capitol. Thanks to the kind care of the organizations I have mentioned, and thanks to the decision of the Congress, this act will confirm the friendship and alliance between our nations. The friendship and alliance which is confirmed through our membership in NATO and our joint participation in international military operations. Freedom is the core value which forms the basis of our friendship and alliance. Freedom and citizens' right to decide their own affairs were at the origin of our modern state. We will never forget the merit of President Woodrow Wilson, who was bound by true friendship with President Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk. We will also never forget that we regained freedom thanks to the US victory in the Cold War after 40 years of totalitarianism. This is symbolically confirmed by a copy of the Liberty Bell, which President George Bush dedicated to President Václav Havel on the day of the first anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. Now, Havel's bust in the Capitol will become another symbol of our shared values, and I perceive it as a certain spiritual connection between the American Revolution and the Velvet Revolution. However divided by the ocean and 2 centuries, I think that both these revolutions primarily showed how powerful words could be. The Declaration of Independence still is a document that inspires and stirs friends of freedom throughout the world. Words were also virtually the only weapon that those few dissidents had in the fight against communist totalitarianism. A seemingly weak weapon turned out to be very powerful. The power of words and truths against the regime built on hypocrisy and lies. Vaclav Havel described this very well in his essay titled The Power of the Powerless. It seems to me that this is precisely why Vaclav Havel was and is so well understood right here in the USA. The strength and longevity of American democracy is to a large extent based on the freedom of speech, and that of course also applies to the open political debate. On the contrary, during communism, we were asked to produce so-called positive constructive criticism. Of course, this phrase is an absurd contradiction. There also was a discrepancy between what we were allowed to say in public and what we talked about at home. Havel and others countered this absurdity and hypocrisy with their living in the truth. Democracy, unlike totality, of course, needs a free debate for its survival. Our democracy has not gone through more than 2 centuries like the American one. Many people among us still haven't got used to this openness, which entails a fair description of everything bad and everything that went wrong. Thus, these people are overcome by disillusionment and frustration, and they even miss the previous regime, which meticulously concealed the truth. But that's no reason to stop telling the people the truth. Right the opposite. It's the reason for telling them the truth more consistently and openly. Because democracy is built on the truth and the power of words. Lies, hypocrisy form a basis of totality. And this is the true legacy of November 17, the true legacy of Václav Havel. Like the American Revolution, our democratic revolution also began as a revolution of words. In 1968, it was the 2,000 words. Later came the Charter 77, and in 1986, a few sentences. When the Velvet Revolution finally came, Václav Havel put our country on the world map thanks to his emphasis on the defense of freedom and human rights. This commitment, this installment of the price for the freedom that we regained, formed a focal point in his historic speech in the US Congress. This is also the meaning of the Velvet Revolution, as it appears when viewed from abroad, the defense of freedom and human rights. I want to say clearly that I consider various debates on how to distort, twist, or possibly completely push aside this legacy to be inappropriate, a big mistake, and a real blunder. Consequently, it would mean only one thing, that the big red, white, and blue pin that Václav Havel stuck into the world map would suddenly disappear. I do not want that. I do not want the Czech Republic to fall into insignificance. I am sure that nobody in this hall wants this. And just as we do not want that words again lose their significance, and that an effort to please the great and powerful would again prevail over the defense of freedom, the interest in the fate of people in all corners of our planet Earth. We all certainly wish just the opposite. We are here today to celebrate the Velvet Revolution, to celebrate the friendship and alliance between the US and the Czech Republic, to celebrate the freedom, our shared value. If America sees itself as a beacon of freedom for all peoples of the world, then I want to say that we do see the light in the Czech Republic, and we will spread it further. I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for attending this dinner.
Thank you very much, Speaker Hamáček. This room is filled with history-making and important friends of freedom, and I'd like to recognize a few more people before we actually start our program. And as I call your name, I would ask you please to stand up. I know this is not the right step in formal protocol, but I'd like to begin by recognizing Dagmar Havlová, Václav Havel's widow. Dasha serves as chairwoman and founder of Vize 97 Foundation and serves on the board of trustees of the Václav Havel Library in Prague. We are honored by your presence here tonight. Dášenko, vítám tě. I would also now properly like to recognize Prime Minister Bohuslav Sobotka, who began his term as Prime Minister in January of this year. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to the United States. And then Karel Schwarzenberg, former Foreign Minister and now Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the Czech Parliament, who was here when Václav Havel came in 1990. And then Zdeněk and Michaela Bakala. Zdeněk has been one of our strongest supporters. And Michaela sits on the board of the Václav Havel Library in Prague. And then Mark Rosenberg, the president of the Florida International University, which has forged a partnership with the Václav Havel Library Foundation. So thank you all for joining us here this evening. Tomorrow really will be a remarkable day when the bust of President Havel will be unveiled in Statuary Hall in the US Congress. This is really an exceptional event, placing Central European leaders next to Winston Churchill on view for perpetuity. And now we gather to celebrate the life and legacy of this extraordinary individual. For tonight's program, we will have several readings from a special collection of writings by President Václav Havel. But before we listen to his words, let's listen to some music. Our first performer, Zuzana Stivinová, starred in Havel's last play, Odcházení, or Leaving. She was a longtime friend of the president's and saw him regularly at the Karlovy Vary Film Festival, where Zuzana would sing a song from Cabaret. In reply, and in his own way, Havel would sing one of his favorite songs, and here it is in Czech, Lavička v Jasmínu, or Bench in Jasmine. Please join me in welcoming Zuzana.
Kéž, lavičko, kéž bys promluvila, vždyť ty vlastně dávno patříš k nám. Ruka má tě kdysi poranila, když jsme ryli srdce a v něm monogram. Ty s nás tenkrát spolu seznámila, polibky si kryla jasmínem. O štěstí jsem v obětí tu snila, Petřín zdál se rájem a ráj Petřínem. Ty jsi tady slyšela všechny moje stesky, snad si i viděla slzu v očích stát. Stále však vzpomínám, jak byl svět hned hezký, když řekl mám tě rád. Kéž, lavičko, kéž bys promluvila, vždyť ty vlastně dávno patříš k nám. Ač nám léta hlavu postříbřila, stále k tobě ráda chodívám.
The words you will hear tonight are excerpts from the vast collection of Havel's writings. We will hear pieces read by Vašek's friends and family and people who share his vision of humanity. The writings come from Havel's early public life, his years of dissidence and imprisonment, his presidency, and his post-presidency. Not included are his much-loved and still frequently performed plays, which I encourage you to read or to see whenever you can. However, the political writings themselves are a form of theater, and the drama is undeniable. For Act 1, my dear friend Ivan Havel, Vacek's younger brother, a researcher in theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence at Charles University, will read from a self-portrait that Vacek wrote in his 20s for Divadlo magazine.
So here goes. I was born in Prague in 1936. I attended primary school, then junior high, and in 1951, when I tried to continue my rather average education in a grammar school, I was sent instead to apprentice as a lab technician. I worked as a lab assistant for 4 years while studying for my high school diploma at night. When I applied for undergraduate studies in chemistry, both because chemistry interested me to some extent, and because as a lab assistant I had no other options, I was not accepted. However, and a year later, I had lost interest in chemistry and set an entrance exam to study art history. I was not accepted. And so I tried to enroll for a degree in philosophy. And when I was not accepted, yet again, I went to study the economics of automotive transportation, the only department that was willing to accept me. Foolishly, I hoped the subject would spark my interest. After sticking it out for 2 years, I realized I'd made a mistake and tried to transfer to the film faculty in the Academy of Fine Arts. I was not accepted. So I enlisted in the army, where, only enough, they accepted me on the spot.
And now, former U.S. Ambassador to Prague, Craig Stapleton, who also served in Paris, will continue the excerpt. Beyond diplomacy, Craig is a businessman and serves as chairman of the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation. Craig.
That was in 1957. 2 years later, having risen to the rank of private, I was demobilized and applied to the theater faculty in the Academy of Fine Arts. I was not accepted. And so I became a stagehand at the ABC Theater. A year later, I moved to the theater in the Balustrade as a stagehand, and I am still there, having worked successively as a lighting technician, an administrator, a reader, and a dramaturge. In 1961, I applied again to the theater faculty at the Faculty of Fine Arts. Again, I was not accepted. I was accepted for the external study of dramaturgy in 1962, when I became dramaturge at the theater on the Balustrade. Clearly, I got my basic education by studying for entrance exams to schools that did not accept me. It's a method I recommend, with the caveat that there's always a danger you might get accepted.
Now allow me to introduce Miss World 2007, born in the Slovak lands and now a Czech resident, Tatiana Kucházová, has raised more than 10 million for international charitable causes, and she created a foundation that encourages exercise for senior citizens. She will read part 1 of the letters to Olga, number 47, written while Havel was imprisoned at Hermanice where he performed hard labor, where he was accepted, he was allowed just one 4-page letter home each week, only about himself, no other writing. Here he describes a discovery about himself.
Madam Albright, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to read this letter. Dear Olga, one of the most frequent themes of my meditations and daydreams are the friends that have left the country. Initially, I feel a slight nostalgia and even some envy of their artistic achievements and a slight anxiety. They are doing what they enjoy at least. They are involved in their work, free from endless complications. No depth viewing or toiling and moiling is pointless now. While I, on the other hand, am deprived of all of that, without the slightest chance of working in a theater. That is how such meditations begin, and they always end with a peculiar sensation of inner joy that I am where I should be, that I have not turned away from myself, that I have not bolted for emergency exit, and that for all of privations, I'm rid of the worst privation of all, one of that I have known myself too, the feeling that I have not measured up to the task. Kissing you, Vasek, September 1980.
Thank you. Our next reader is Martin Palos, a friend and former ambassador and a board member to both the Prague Library and the New York-based Library Foundation and director of the Vaclav Havel Initiative on Human Rights and Diplomacy at FIU. Martin will read an excerpt from the diary Havel kept while imprisoned for the first time after the foundation of Charter 77. It was recently discovered in Zdeněk Urbánek's garage by his grandson, David Dušek.
I'm not cut out for it. I'm too polite and nervous. I see something behind everything. Cross-examination, mix of reality and interrogation about it. Reality is reconstructed in a different way each time, according to the development of the investigation. The same is played always again, according to the testimony. Some of my testimonies, completely absurd reality, if it was reconstructed according to them. 18th of February, Friday, there was no interrogation again. Thinking about myself. I miss nature. What a man has in himself, that he minds ugly environment so much and everything. Endless contemplations about what will happen again and again. Part of punishment is probably not being in nature, meeting interesting people with something, music, paintings, thoughts, understanding human relationships. What was I supposed to do in a different way in my life? The 16th of February, Saturday, I cannot go on like this anymore. I will start a new life in the morning. I will write down everything that will come to my mind. Sometimes I will rest on my bed. Phenomenology of hope and disappointment. It would help me a lot if I could write letters anytime to tell my world immediately everything I feel and experience. But it is not happening. I am not able to write just like that, as I speak, by myself. Have my own humor, my personality. I just write plays where others speak, or essays, or petitions, or requests in their official language. Letters were the only thing I wrote as myself.
Fast forward a decade, and the dissident becomes the president, defying all odds. Czechs and Slovaks, Poles, East Germans, Bulgarians, and Romanians were all demanding change. Even the Soviet Union had begun to develop cracks in the system. In Prague, many who had escaped the old order came home to help the dissidents to set up a new government after the communists departed. These who returned brought not only their love and knowledge of Czech and Slovak democracy, but also experience from other Western countries. Jacques Rupnik was one of those who returned. Now a professor at Sciences Po in Paris and a director of the Havel Library Foundation, Jacques served in 1990 as an advisor to the new President Havel. He will read from Havel's first New Year's address to the nation.
For 40 years on this day, you heard from my predecessors variations on the same theme. How our country was flourishing, how many millions of tons of steel were produced, how happy we all were, how we trusted our government, and what bright perspectives were unfolding before us. I assume you did not propose me for this office so that I, too, would lie to you. You may ask what kind of a republic I dream of. Let me reply. I dream of a republic independent, free, democratic, of a republic economically prosperous yet socially just. In short, a humane republic which serves the individual and which therefore holds the hope that the individual will serve it in turn. Of a republic of well-rounded people, because without such people, it is impossible to solve any of our problems, human, economic, ecological, social, or political. The most distinguished of my predecessors opened his first speech with a quotation from the great Czech educator Comenius. Allow me to close my first speech with my own paraphrase of the same statement. People, your government has returned to you.
Thank you very much. Not that anybody in this room needs to be reminded, but these few short excerpts are vivid proof of why we are honoring Vaclav Havel. Now, that concludes Act 1 of our evening, and I invite you now to enjoy your dinner and each other's conversations. I will be back.
My friend here said, go shh, and you would all quiet down. It's hard to quiet you down because I'm so thrilled that you all have so much to say to each other. That's the whole point of the evening, right? Is to get everybody together. Again, my job is to say thanks, but I'd like to tell a little story that the Speaker of the Parliament just told me, is that in 1995-96, Speaker Hamacek was one of our scholarship students to go to spend a year in England, which is why he speaks English so well. And it shows how the role of NGOs in the United States and the roles of foundations in Europe and the United States have played such an enormous role in the early days of this wonderful country, and something that we have to keep going. I'm looking at Paige Alexander, who's one of our great leaders in the USAID, how we have to keep this vitality of NGOs and people to people and people making contact like you all have in the future with all of the new democracies. And I'd like to tell another story. The Vaclav Havel Library Foundation has a liaison and partnership with the Columbia Libraries. They have the archives of Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, and through a Mellon grant, they have been capturing all the tweets and all of the things that go out of the Orange Revolution, the Green Revolution, and all of the other revolutions and all the squares. And I said to them, to the head of the library, I said, James Neal, I said, would you just do a quick search and see how many times Václav Havel's name was mentioned? 17,000 times. From all of those squares, people were invoking the legacy of this man. So that's what you all are here to support. And we thank again the American Friends of the Czech Republic and all of the people that have helped us. And I'd like to introduce a couple of other thank yous. Hey, Craig, pretty good wine. Craig Stapleton. Springer Stapleton, wine. Straight from Prague. It was straight from the Czech Republic, I should say. It's probably not produced in Prague. And Craig is also the chairman of the board of the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation. The people that aren't here tonight and who are very, very important to the success of this evening are Paul Wilson, who is as you all know, Václav Havel's translator for many, many, many years. Bob Silvers, who was planning to come, except he has to get the next issue of the New York Review of Books out, and he works night and day, and he sends his apologies, but he can't be here. And for what you're seeing here, and what you see if you're Europeans and you go through that part of the Havel airport in Prague, you see the great tapestry done by Aubusson that our great friend Bill Shipsey got the funders from U2, Bono, and Yoko Ono to have this image that you see here reproduced forever on the walls of the Havel airport in Prague. Now, I know most of you hate doing this, but I'm going to do it. There are a whole lot of former ambassadors, current ambassadors in this room from both directions. Would all of you please stand at the same time and we can ring keys or applaud? All of you, up, 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 up. This is a joyous evening, and it's never more joyous than when I welcome Madeleine back to the stage. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to be back again. Thank you, Wendy. And we're going to begin with some more music, but let me announce that Billy Gibbons of the band ZZ Top will be performing tomorrow at the dedication, so we look forward to that. But tonight, we're going to hear from Glenn Hansard, who's an Irish songwriter, singer, and actor, and you all may know him from the movie Once, where he starred with Markéta Irglová. Tonight, for a change, he will not sing one of his own songs, but one by Jaroslav Hutka that eventually forced Hutka to move to Holland in the 70s. But before I welcome him to the stage, I just, Wendy, as you asked all these former people to stand up, it reminds me of a line out of Havel's play, Leaving, because we've all left. And I can't remember this exactly, but I found it very applicable to all of us. Somebody comes to the man that was the former chancellor, and he says, I have a perfect job for you now, to be an assistant to a deputy, which is all of us do as former people. So it makes that play very real. So please join me now in welcoming Glenn Hansard, who will sing the English version of Havlíčku Havle. Oh, I got to kiss it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks a lot. Thank you. I was asked by Bill Shipsey would I come along and sing a song at this tonight, and I was, of course, hugely honored, but couldn't really find the connection with myself and the Czech Republic, other than I've loved people from the Czech Republic very much, and I do love people from the Czech Republic. And I thought about what I could sing for you. And we were walking, myself and Hedvika were walking home from eating food, and we walked past a concert hall where we saw the name Jaroslav Hudka. It didn't mean anything to me. And Hedy said, we must go in here now. And we walked into this concert and we heard Jaroslav sing, and he was absolutely spellbinding and wonderful. And he sang this song, Havličku Havle, and I said to Hedy, that's what I'll sing at the gig. And so we got to speak to him after he had spoken to all of his fans. I got to speak to him briefly, and I said, would you mind if I sang your song at this dinner? And he said, it would be fine. I mean, it's fine with me. And I said, why didn't they ask you to go? And he says, well, I'm very busy. And so I learned this song, and I tried to learn it in Czech, and forgive me, I failed. Every time I sang it for my friends, they laughed. And so I've learned the chorus, and the rest I had translated by a friend, David Viknar, in Prague, who did a very good translation of the song. And so I asked, the day before yesterday, I asked Jaroslav, would he come and sing with me? I said, I'll pay your flight, just come. And he said, you know, I can't, because I'm actually singing that song on Wenceslav Square the same night. And so I thought, what a great excuse. So. Can you hear this guitar? So, those of you who speak Czech, which is probably 70 or 80% of the room, I assume, would you please join me in the chorus of this song? A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. They've got you now cornered under surveillance. Angels from Brixton who worship but violence. The fairy tales, kid stories, running the puppet show, pulling the strings so deftly you'll never know. You confuse them all right, observing the law, binding on servant and master and all. But the masters took umbrage, said no laws were needed. It's we who know best who's got to be heeded. A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. What were you thinking, stirring their porridge, riding not a horse, but a flea-drawn carriage? Mr. Bach holds poets in such high esteem, eager to hear them sing of his regime. It's fretfully foolish, fighting the mighty. Instead of minding your business, you mock them rightly. The competence surely would land you a job if you'd only pay ball, if you just shut your guard. A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. A podle litery paragraf šavle, tež dumej opravu Havličku Havle. Quiet and hushed, they came for a visit. All nice and proper, they arranged your transit. Guest rooms, dear sir, gladly await you. No dress code required, our clothes will fit you. In Brixton, the rumors been spreading like fire. They captured Havlicek, now it's looking dire. But people won't let it stand. He was their spokesman, a handsome guy too. Now he's locked in a dungeon. A podle litery paragraf szable, też dumej o prawu Havličku Havle. A podle litery paragraf szable, też dumej o prawu Havličku Havle. I'm going to sing it one more time, and I just want you to do it. For those of you who sing it in the spirit of Havel, who sing it in the spirit of Hudka, and who sing it for the future of Czech Republic, and to put the poets back in power, because the poets invent the world, the soldiers protect that invention, and we need to remember this all the way back through history. We follow the words. A podle litery paragraf szable, też dumej o prawu Havličku Havle. A podle litery paragraf szable, też dumej o prawu Havličku Havle. Děkuji moc. Thank you, Martin. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really terrific. We have heard readings from before the Velvet Revolution through Havel's presidency, but his writings and his battles did not end in 1989, nor did they end in Prague. For Act Two, we will hear more of Havel's words that shaped events and people the world over. Their reach has grown with time and extends into our political life today. Civic Forum produced much of the Velvet Revolution staging. One of the spokesmen, Michael Jantovsky, emerged as an advisor and press secretary to Havel when he was elected president. Soon, Michael accompanied his boss to the United States on an extraordinary tour and was there during a joint session of Congress with a live television audience to actually be Havel's voice. I had the honor of helping President Havel prepare for that speech, and it's a day that I'll never forget. Michael is now ambassador to the Court of St. James in London and the author of a brand new Havel biography, a copy of which you will receive tonight. Really, congratulations. He has also represented his country in Washington and Tel Aviv, and he will now read a memorable passage from Havel's 1990 address to the joint session of Congress.
Well, Madeleine, I have bad news for you. Can you hear me now? Well, I have bad news for you, Madeleine. Havel's successor as president said the translation was poor. Okay, here.
Among other things, he said.
Among other things. Here goes. The salvation of this human world lies nowhere else than in the human heart, in the human power to reflect, in human humbleness, and in human responsibility. Without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better in the sphere of our being as humans, and the catastrophe toward which the world is headed, whether it be ecological, social, demographic, or a general breakdown of civilization, will be unavoidable. If we are no longer threatened by world war or by the danger that the absurd mountains of accumulated nuclear weapons might blow up the world, this does not mean that we have definitely won. We are in fact far from definite victory. We are still a long way from that family of man. In fact, we seem to be receding from the ideal rather than drawing closer to it. Interests of all kinds, personal, selfish, state, national, group, and if you like, company interests still considerably outweigh genuinely common and global interest. We are still under the sway of the destructive and thoroughly vain belief that man is the pinnacle of creation and not just a part of it, and therefore everything is permitted. There are still many who say they are concerned not for themselves, but for the cause, while they are demonstrably out for themselves and not for the cause at all. We are still destroying the planet that was entrusted to us and its environment. We still close our eyes to the growing social, ethnic, and cultural conflicts in the world. From time to time, we say that the anonymous mega machinery we have created for ourselves no longer serves us, but rather has enslaved us. Yet we still fail to do anything about it. In other words, we still don't know how to put morality ahead of politics, science, and economics. We are still incapable of understanding that the only genuine backbone of all our actions, if they are to be moral, is responsibility. Responsibility to something higher than my family, my country, my firm, my success. Responsibility to the order of being, where all our actions are indelibly recorded and where, and only where, they will be properly judged.
Thank you. Leopoldo Lopez is the founder and national coordinator of Venezuela's political party, Voluntad Popular, and a former mayor of Chacao and the nation's capital, Caracas. Tonight, he is in prison, punished for leading opposition protests in his country. President Obama, among others, has called for his release. Joining us tonight is Leopoldo's mother, Antoineta Lopez. She will be reading from Disturbing the Peace, the book-length interview with journalist Karel Vizdala. Here, Havel, who was out of prison but in damaged health, was asked, "Do you see even a grain of hope anywhere?" Oh.
Hope. In this deep and powerful scene is not the same as joy that things are going well or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. The more unpromising the situation in which we demonstrate hope, the deeper that hope is. Hope is not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. In short, I think that the deepest and most important form of hope, the only one that can keep us above water and urge us to good works, and the only true source of the breathtaking dimension of the human spirit and its efforts, is something we get as if we're formed elsewhere. It is also this hope, above all, that gives us the strength to live and continually to try new things, even in the conditions that seems as hopeless as ours do, here and now.
The fermenting of social consciousness in Cuba has gone on for more than 5 decades. One of the leading voices for freedom of speech and assembly there in recent years was Oswaldo Paya. In 2012, his car ran off the road, hitting a tree and killing him. The circumstances remain murky, with some witnesses saying his car was rammed, though the government denies this. Before Paya died, he was harassed and intimidated for his work to achieve democratic political reforms in Cuba through peaceful means. For this, President Havel nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Joining us is Paya's daughter, Rosa Maria Paya, who will read a portion of a letter Havel wrote in reply to her father.
Thank you so much, Madam Albright, and thank you all for the honor. Dear friend, I hope that there is no need to assure you that I will do whatever I can, in part, to pay back the debt that I feel to those Democrats who helped me and my friends for many years, or who expressed their solidarity in various ways during their visit to communist Czechoslovakia. I would like to draw your attention to an observation of mine. Whatever your merits, however brave and respectable as dissidents you may be, even though you may have spent years in prison or written clever books, in spite of all that, pragmatic politicians in the democratic world may suspect that you are mere grumbles, inveterate complainers, slightly crazy, and constantly carpian. Such a suspicion may lead to the following opinion. We may support them symbolically, but from the point of view of the realistic politics, there is no need to rely on them. They are not the right partners for us. And yet, the opposite is the truth. It is important to convince politicians in democratic countries about this, which I have been trying to do for many years. Dear friend, I think that, in spite of all the difficulties, it is worth treading this path. I firmly believe that, despite the communist state propaganda, a majority of Cubans realize that the countries of Central Europe started off in the right direction 14 years ago, and that it would be good for you to follow their example. Yours sincerely, Vaclav Havel, November 17, 2003.
The work to defend freedom never ends. Our final reader was born in Iran, a country with a proud and complex history that strictly regulates people's freedoms and attracts harsh criticism for its human rights violations. Azad Nafisi is the author of the new title, The Republic of Imagination, and a previous bestseller, Reading Lolita in Tehran. She currently teaches at Johns Hopkins University. Her reading is from Havel's commencement speech at Harvard.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. As an Iranian American, it is the greatest honor to be here tonight. I feel that keys are jangling in millions of hearts across the world, not only in totalitarian societies, where every lover of freedom feels that Harvard is a kindred spirit and a kith and kin, but also in democracies, lest we become too complacent and we forget that democracy also needs to be nurtured and renewed, and that freedom has also its own ordeals and responsibilities and has to be pursued the same way we pursue happiness. Yes, regardless of where I begin my thinking about the problems facing our civilization, I always return to the theme of human responsibility, which seems incapable of keeping pace with civilization and preventing it from turning against the human race. It is as though the world has simply become too much for us to deal with. There is no way back. Only a dreamer can believe that the solution lies in curtailing the progress of civilization in some way or other. The main task in the coming era is something else, a radical renewal of our sense of responsibility. Our conscience must catch up to our reason. Otherwise, we are lost. It is my profound belief that there is only one way to achieve this. We must divest ourselves of our egotistical anthropocentrism, our habit of seeing ourselves as masters of the universe who can do whatever occurs to us. We must discover a new respect for what transcends us, for the universe, for the earth, for nature, for love, and for reality. Our respect for other people, for other nations, and for other cultures can only grow from a humble respect for the cosmic order and from an awareness that we are a part of it, that we share in it, and that nothing of what we do is lost, but rather becomes part of the eternal memory of being where it is judged. A better alternative of the future of humanity, therefore, clearly lies in imbuing our civilization with a spiritual dimension. It is not just a matter of understanding its multicultural nature and finding aspiration for the creation of a new world order in the common roots of all cultures. It is also essential that Euro-American cultural sphere, the one which created this civilization and taught humanity the destructive pride, now return to its own spiritual roots and become an example to the rest of the world in the search for a new humility.
Thank you, Azar, and thank you to each and every one of our readers who came from around the world to celebrate with us tonight. You have brought Havel's immortal words back and reminded us of their value. You illustrated why the Czech experience reclaiming human decency after oppression can be universally understood and perhaps repeated because the pursuit of freedom has no end. In the final months of his life, even though his health was deteriorating rapidly, Vaclav Havel signed a document known as the Budapest Appeal, which reminded every country in Europe of its obligations to observe democratic norms. How appropriate today. His last public statements were in support of prisoners of conscience in Belarus and of opposition protests in Moscow, where on the day of his funeral, 80,000 demonstrators observed a moment of silence to mark his passing. I last saw Havel when I was among those who gathered in Prague to celebrate his 75th birthday. My gift to him at the time was a compass that had been used by American soldiers in World War I, the conflict that led to Czechoslovakia's founding. In my note, I cited the irony of giving a compass to someone who has served as the North Star for an entire generation. In one sense, Havel was very much a product of his place and time, but he thought, spoke, and acted on behalf of principles that will always matter everywhere. He saw the conscience as a living organ to be nourished through regular exercise and strengthened by pushing back against high winds. He prized liberty not as an end in itself, but as a means through which we might finally ensure that truth shall prevail. No one could have been more Czech than Vaclav Havel, but his wit and warmth, his insights and wisdom spoke to everyone. And though we miss him, we will never, ever forget him, and boy, do we need him now. So we bring our evening to a close, and we need to shake our keys for the American Friends of the Czech Republic and for the Vaclav Havel Library Foundation in New York. And Wendy will close us up. Let's keep the legacy alive.
And we waited until the end because our representatives in Congress have to take votes and do transition. But we'd like to recognize how important it is for all of us Americans and all of you Czechs and Slovaks that Chris Murphy, our wonderful senator, once the youngest congressman and once the youngest senator stand up, Chris, please. Has been here. He's a wonderful, wonderful friend of Bill's and mine. Senator Dan Coates, are you over there? Stand up wherever you are. From Indiana, thank you so much for taking the time to come. And Jan Tchaikovsky, where are you? Okay, stand up. A rising star in the House of Representatives. It's very, very unusual that we would have this many representatives of our Congress at a dinner like this. I can tell you how important it is that they've even, I have to say, Chris didn't stay with his 2-year-old and his 5-year-old to be here. So, and last of all, besides thanking Vaclav Havel for being who he was, I think we should all raise a huge cha-cha or keys or whatever it is to Madeleine. My Blanca.
Ladies and gentlemen, our beloved Madeleine Albright.